everyone is back online. Excellent. So again, we start. A very warm welcome to the panelists of this second panel on future perspectives. We have Andrew Deeks, President of University College Dublin, Nouria Hernandez, Rector of University de Lausanne, Alojzy Nowak, Rector of University of Warsaw, Ivanka Popović, Rector of University of Belgrade, and Edita Sužiedėlienė, Vice-Rector and Pro-Rector for Research of the University of Vilnius. So after already the discussion in the previous panel and after the keynote speech by Xavier, Prats, Monné, some already important elements have been put on the table, but there are many others. And I would like to start this panel asking you a very general question related to the future of university. So it has been said by our keynote speaker and also by some of the panelists in the previous session that of course universities in the future will be different. How do you see your own university, your alliance, UNICA, in the new normal? Which will be the good things that really we should keep, and the lessons learned and the future developments that you see as positive aspects for the future? I don't know who would like to speak. You can open your microphone or raise your hand as you prefer. Yes, please, Nouria, yes.
I will speak even though I was absent before, and I really apologize for this. But I just want to give to say a few words about the experience we've had at the University of Lausanne. After the COVID crisis, when things got a little bit easier, we had a huge questionnaire go to all our students and also all our faculty. And of course, one of the main questions was who would like to continue having classes online and who would like to stop having classes online. And the overwhelming majority, I was really surprised, the overwhelming majority said they wanted to go back to normal classes. In other words, classes where people go into the classroom and see their professor in person. I was surprised by the percentages. It was, again, more than 80% of people who voted that way. But this said, I don't think we will go back to simply classes that are given by a professor to his students without any without any online component of this class. Because there are also students, and of course also professors, who thought it was extremely convenient to be able to go and listen to a class 2 days afterwards, or during the weekend, or whatever. And so I think the future for us will be that classes will be given in person, but we will also be taped in some way or another and made available to students. And this is the simplest level. And at other levels, I think being able to give classes online, courses online, will expand tremendously the kind of students that we can reach. In other words, we can now reach students who work the whole day, who are already in professional life, and who cannot afford to go to university during the day, but who can work at night or during the weekends and who want to get a degree. And these people now will be able to do this. It will take them longer than a student who can do that full time, but it will be possible. And of course, handicapped students have told us that for them, having classes online was a huge advantage, because it makes, I mean, by handicapped, I mean physically handicapped, because it makes their life infinitely easier. So these are just a few remarks.
Thank you, very interesting. Let's continue. Who would like to take the floor? Yeah, please, Edita.
Thank you. Actually, I think the experiences of universities are pretty much the same. this COVID crisis. Of course, there are specificities, but all we have faced general challenges that are actually the same. And I think that these challenges, COVID related, they will definitely turn on to think about the future challenges, how we could adjust our modus operandi of universities. And it seems from the discussion of previous panel, and I think we will discuss in this panel, that online learning, of course, delivered a huge experience. And universities somehow, one's better, another worse, they gain this experience, and they have to bring it and think how to use in the best way for future teaching and learning. I think it's very important to think how in the best way to use this experience. And what I have in mind, actually we have faced, and I'm as personal as a teacher, and most of us perhaps do this, what I faced during this year, that quality of learning has somehow dropped. I think not in every area, not in every discipline, but this indicates that actually our preparation and our readiness to deliver in the best way. Of course, it was this ad hoc experience, and we managed this how we could. But anyway, we should think how to improve this online learning by increasing quality of teaching and learning. And in this place, I think experience of universities and alliances in particular could be exploited in the best way, how to exchange and how to use each other best practices to continue with this mode of teaching and learning. So what I mean, actually, the initiatives such as educational innovation labs or other formats could be how to say, in the agenda, and we should perhaps think about such kind of exchange of experience. So quality of learning and teaching and learning, I think it's important point. If we as universities want to keep our flagship in a high level of teaching and learning. So if we, let's say, position ourselves that we in this changing world, in this digitalizing world, if we want to keep this flagship in highest quality of learning and teaching, so we should think about how to use experience and how to improve this 1 year experience for the future. I think this could be a challenge for universities, not to operate in the mode that we already learned during this year, but to improve this modus operandi of online teaching and learning. That is one point. Another point is, in my opinion, we have to think how to find the models to quickly adjust and be transformative of this mode of operation. So let's say it was already mentioned that pandemic still continues, and we know what is awaited in the future. So it could be waves and one more closings. So we should think how to more efficiently and more transformative way to adjust study process. So this is another point. And of course, what this pandemic exposed, at least here in the country universities, it has exposed quite big gaps in skills of teaching personnel and also of students. So we also should think how to fill these gaps. and continue to improving study process. So that few moments that I would like to point from perspective of our university at least, and country universities, and we should think how to use the best experience and change it perhaps in some specific formats. So I think universities have very good examples, and I really encourage to think about this. How to accumulate this experience to be more competitive in delivering teaching and in learning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Edita. Who else would like to intervene, please? Ivanka, yes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. I would just like to pick up on what Edita started, and some of these gaps that we noticed, because I think the enthusiasm of the students was definitely there when we started teaching online, but there were some issues related to the fact that not all students have the same access to internet, quality equipment, and that they had to share possibly computers, or that they didn't have enough space to have the privacy for the teaching experience. So I think he brought up a lot of social issues that we haven't really fully been able to overcome in this process. So people did not have the same conditions for online learning. And we are definitely stuck with 2 generations of students that have had an incomplete education in terms of practical skills. And the question is whether we can do something to make up for this loss that they have. Some that are moving from undergraduate to graduate studies have this possibility, maybe through master programs, to catch up a little bit, but the ones that are leaving school, they are really handicapped, and this will probably affect their success on the job market. And this, I think, is a little bit worrying. And one aspect that may not have been sufficiently covered is actually what happened to the science, the experimental science during the lockdowns. Because as most research-intensive universities, and generally the universities are closely linked to what is advancement in science in their teaching process, I have the feeling that after the first few months, when people wrote all the papers they had to write and other obligations that they had, that we had some very serious issues about the continuity of the process. And maybe we will have a spike in the number of published papers in the near future, but then there will be a gap in the quantity of experimental research work done in the meantime. So that means there must be a drop afterwards at some point. So we have to look at ways of how we can support our experimental researchers in their activities to catch up in what was an unwanted break. And not to say that there were also some gaps in various procurement processes that made some problems. And finally, I would just like to say some of the financial aspects of the work of universities, where I think inevitably almost all universities invested a lot of money into strengthening their IT capabilities, whether this was having to do with new infrastructure or maybe training programs for the teachers. And also this will definitely affect how things will be moving on. Also, there were some requests for tuition to be reduced, which realistically, I can understand why the students wanted this, but on the other hand, the universities had enhanced expenses. So these are all things that are not easy to put together. And I do believe that something that was mentioned already before, that I'm not at all surprised by any type of questionnaire that talks about what people would like. People would like to go back to how it was and the face-to-face teaching. I think this is definite, and I think it's wanted both by the students and the teachers. But practical issues and the fact that the pandemic is not over and we don't know whether there will be new waves, we will have to find a way to deal with this, and generally to see how the overall economic circumstances in a country, which varies very differently, will affect higher education. And I think we are, I very much respect the optimism of the previous speakers, but I see that there will be issues, and I think we have to be very cautious in how we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivanka. And Andrew?
Yeah, thanks very much. And thank you, Luciano, for the opportunity to talk to this distinguished gathering. I think it's very interesting that the experiences are similar around our network in terms of the desire for students to get back to face-to-face learning and to on-campus experiences. And just in terms of reflecting on some of the comments from our keynote speaker, I think it's a mistake to think that somehow transmission of knowledge was the monopoly of universities until the digital age. I think our monopoly on knowledge ended with the invention of the printing press. And at the stage the books were readily available, then transmission of knowledge via books was then totally possible. Public libraries then made knowledge accessible to everyone. So I think it's a mistake to think of universities as simply vehicles through which knowledge is transmitted or indeed generated. Actually, we're part of an experience economy, for want of a better word. Students come to us for an overall experience, and particularly undergraduate students, as Edita has indicated, and for perhaps mature age students, then online learning experiences may be more convenient and will be used more widely going forward. But for undergraduate students, the students themselves, the parents, even our Minister for Education is on our back in terms of returning to have that holistic campus experience. And it's not just the teaching and learning side, it's all of the social activities, the sporting activities, the other ad hoc learning experiences, life learning experiences that go along with the campus experience, which is why students pay fees, why they compete in exams to come and attend at our universities. So I think that's probably the first thing I'd say. In terms of then mobility, while as I think Luciano, you indicated in the last session, virtual mobility has opened up the possibility of mobility to far more people. However, we find that there's been an increase in terms of the students that want to go on real physical semester abroad mobility, even while the pandemic is still there. They're desperate to get out and to get to experience other things. So I think it's pretty clear that these experiences, just as much as we can watch a football match on TV in the comfort of our home and see all of the replays, and we can pause the action whenever we want to go and get a snack or something, but still people go and stand in the pouring rain in stadiums to watch the events in person, and were dreadfully disappointed over the course of this pandemic when they couldn't do that. So I think that's one piece to say. The piece that perhaps hasn't been mentioned up until now is the things people didn't miss, and that included going along to submit a form, an enrollment form, or to get a signature on a form, to go and knock on a professor's door 10 times before you actually found the professor in the office and were able to talk to them. There's a whole lot in terms of the administrative activity of the university, which I think is going to be revolutionized by the experience we've had here. Students will increasingly demand that everything in terms of the administration of their experience is available to them on their mobile devices, that any support they need in that regime is available to them when and where they want it. And I think that as we look forward, we have to embrace both the opportunity and the challenge that presents. When we look to other industries, for example, we see how in terms of banks, the physical bank branch is now an endangered species. Banks are closing branches right the way around, yet customer service has never been higher because most of that service is provided through your devices. So what I see in terms of the future trend is that our administrative services will increasingly become digitally mediated, and the students will be able to do all of their administrative processes, get their results, etc., through their mobile devices. Yet they're coming to us for this physical immersive experience where they get together with other human beings in physical form. They engage in discussions in tutorial groups. They ask questions in a lecture setting, they absorb information in a lecture setting. I think all of that is going to continue. So that would be my intervention at this point.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you for giving us this good example of the football match. I think I will quote you in the future. Say this, I think, is a good example for many of us. And also for this point that is new actually in the discussion until now of the administration. Indeed, we really saw the administration of many traditional universities to become more efficient. And this was something that really would have been much more difficult to do for different reasons. You know, the unions and whatever say, why you want to do this and that. But in the crisis of COVID, really we saw everyone so helpful, you know, ready to change their way of working, you know, to really help out everyone. So I think this is a great point, and we are all very grateful to all the administration of our universities for being so helpful, you know, in this last 18 months. Alojzy, would you like to intervene at this point as well?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure, as always, to be with you. I would like to thank you, Luciano, for inviting me here. I am listening with pleasure what you are saying, and to some extent I fully agree, so I will be not repeating. I even made some notes to use them later in managing the University of Warsaw. Of course, to some extent, we have probably different viewpoints because we come from different culture and from different societies and from different worlds. But at the beginning, I wanted to say that I agree with some statements. Number one, I agree with Xavier that universities probably all over the world are losing their monopolistic position. So we are not only the institution which create knowledge, then transforming this knowledge and certifying this knowledge. So it will have probably very important influence on the future role of the universities in many places. Maybe I will come later to say what I think about that. Number two, in particular, COVID showed us that university, or at least teaching in regular terms, is not the possibility of getting knowledge. And recognize that both professors and students, that probably knowledge can be received without staying at the university. We have students here at Warsaw University who didn't attend any class, regular formal class, for 2 years. They haven't seen university, and they will graduate from the University of Warsaw. Probably it will influence on them very much, but anyway, they can do that. They attended classes both at Warsaw University and in some good places all over the world, and they passed the exams, fulfilled the criteria, and they will get diploma. Will thus have positive influence on the people, on the students? I don't think so. This is one of the things I am regretting very much, that the pandemic limited very much exchange of students and exchange of professors. It's not only, university is not only about teaching, it's not only about researching, but it's also, in my opinion at least, about influencing the young people, and not only young people, how to behave, how to ask the questions, how to answer the questions, how to have the perception of the world, of the society, etc., etc. And I am observing this, taking into account University of Warsaw. We sent abroad, and we had a lot of students and faculty members in the last 15, 20 years, and they completely changed the university by observations, by understanding, by also requiring changes within Warsaw University. So this is also the place where I should, and I want to say thank you, my colleagues from different places in Europe who opened the doors for Polish students and professors to go. The process, I'm thinking about France, Germany, England, Italy, whatever places, Benelux countries, and not only northern Scandinavian countries, etc., but also eastern countries. And the problem is that we have not changed the process of adopting. The process is still going on here in Poland. And so what I am afraid is that, who knows, maybe in result of pandemic, the process of exchanges will be stopped. It will be not for us. This is one point of view. Another point of view, I don't know how about in your countries, but here in my country, the society is expecting something more from the university, the outside world, businesses, government, and also local governments. So we are also trying, and University of Warsaw will be also trying to answer some questions, because university is not only, as you know better than me, not only to adjust to the requirements of the so-called real world, but university, at least in my opinion, must also create the world, also in terms of employment, in terms of political issues, economic issues, research, etc. And probably what pandemic showed us is also that people can stay at home, that they are not obliged, or not always obliged to go to work to the companies. So probably, as I observe here, multinationals, they have been changing their nature as well. So they say to some people, to some employees, stay at home. It was for us cheaper because we don't need to rent space. You can be maybe more efficient. We will see how the efficiency works probably in half a year, or maybe in 1 year. But anyway, if this is the case, we have to change also the teaching methods and the contacts with the students. In this sense, we have to adjust to the situation. I don't think that it will be a very easy way, but we have to think at least about that, and we have to discuss it, etc. On the other side, the protection of environment, which is extremely important, in particular in Western countries of the European Union, but here is becoming also important. So University of Warsaw, but I think also another universities, they have to show how to implement the idea of, say, environment protection. So for that reason, we are going to build so-called intelligent green University of Warsaw. Probably some money we will get from European Union, probably some money from the government, maybe university will create some money, etc. So what I am saying is that there are many expectations here. We have been taking also an example of how to cooperate between business and universities. In Anglo-Saxon world, it has been almost developed. In so-called continental Europe, in Europe, not necessarily. I mean, we are under-invested, we can say, I mean, at least at Warsaw University. So we are looking, someone were talking, Ivanka, about money, we can talk more about money, financing the university, etc. We are looking for money. And I am the best maybe case because I am economist and financist and I am involved in business. So I am signing agreements with multinationals, Polish firms operating here. And on the other side, I am attacked, for example, by the press mostly, but also by the people, some people from the university saying, what are you doing? You are president or rector of the university, you are a researcher, you should concentrate on research and doing your work, managing the university and not being involved in business. But how can you convince president of the company if you do not cooperate with him or her, not making consulting, etc. I am giving my example, but it's not only the example. On the other side, we see also pandemia had some positive signs, at least here, and I'm observing. Number one, I mean, the technical culture increased at Warsaw University and in Poland dramatically. 2 years ago, before pandemia, probably 20–25% of professors, faculty members could teach in digital way. I mean, they used computers, we had computers, but it was not easy for many people. Nowadays, even senior professors can do that. So they have learned. They understand that this tool is important, etc., etc. So it's very important. But we also understand what field is and will be invest in the near future. Medicine in particular and pharmaceutical issue. It is, so we don't have, for example, the School of Medicine. We had, then communists removed, and just now we have also, I'm sure that we will be able, but we have also opened the School of Medicine, because probably for in the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years, a lot of money will go in everything what is connected medicine, which is connected.
Thank you very much, Alojzy. We need to continue with maybe a second round of interventions. We're very interested in this point that you mentioned, related to this acceleration of course, all aspects of digitalization at our university. This is also my experience, in some other universities, including mine.
I don't know if I can go deeper.
Yeah, and the only thing, unfortunately, the time is limited. I would like to do a second round because there is an important point that was not touched until now that is very close to the heart of UNICA, which is interdisciplinary education and training. As you know, we had an important rector seminar this year promoted by the University of Ljubljana and Utopia in February, and there, we actually discussed, this aspect. But of course, it's always interesting to look back and also in view of the COVID-19 crisis. In a few words, the point I would like to raise and ask your reaction is, we know that education until 2 centuries ago was interdisciplinary by definition. All scholars, they usually knew almost everything it was possible to know at that time. And then in the last 2 centuries, we went deeper and deeper in all disciplines, etc. All disciplines became, of course, so complicated. So the issue of interdisciplinarity, which has been debated for a long time, very often is, from the practical point of view, is difficult because, of course, if you want to study engineering or medicine or architecture or many other disciplines, it's very difficult to do at the same time. Of course, study topics from the humanities or social sciences or whatever. So the point here is, do you think that this extreme push towards digitalization could also be useful to improve the level of interdisciplinarity at our universities? Meaning that, having a higher level of digitalization can help us to reduce a bit some of the details that usually we have to teach in all disciplines, allowing the possibility to students to study also something else. Because nowadays, of course, through mobile phones, all students, can find easily the details of some of the things that before, when I studied, I had to know everything by heart. And nowadays, in a few seconds, I can find what I'm looking for. And this question is related also to assessment. If we change the way of teaching and learning, I think we also have to change the way of assess knowledge. And introducing again more modern ways of assessing. Many universities are already doing that without asking too many details, but posing more complex questions to the students that even if you don't have a double camera in the room and the student is in front of the screen, in a few seconds, the student will not be able to answer in a good way the question if he or she does not know. very well the subject. So I just put into you these two, I would say, big questions: interdisciplinarity and assessment of knowledge at our universities. Who would like to start? Shall we go in? Yeah, please, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Luciana. I think it's a very interesting question because, of course, as knowledge has expanded and as particularly digital technology has allowed us to, particularly in scientific areas, to discover much more than we've ever known before. And I think, as has been pointed out, in terms of the vaccines that were created this time round, they could never have been created, particularly the mRNA vaccines, they could never have been created without digital technology. So each of the discipline areas becomes more and more complex and more involved. So although some of the maybe surface learning might be covered in the way that you suggest, actually the depth of the disciplines is becoming deeper and deeper. And so I think we won't get away from the fact that people will need to study disciplines, because without disciplines, we can't have interdisciplinarity. So you need to base interdisciplinarity on strong disciplines. And that means that you need specialists in disciplines. So I don't think we can get away from that. The second piece I'd say around disciplinarity is that, particularly in the social sciences and the arts and humanities, a lot of what students spend their time learning is the language of the disciplines. So their particular discipline will have a particular language and a particular culture, a culture of learning, which is different from other disciplines. And you don't get that from reading a Wikipedia article. So although, again, some surface knowledge can be gained by looking at these things, apologies, then the in-depth knowledge in the disciplines is only gained by a significant amount of study in those discipline areas. So now, interdisciplinarity then, of course, becomes difficult because of those differences in language and differences in approaches across disciplines. And that's what we've struggled with, I think, for the last 20 years in universities, as we've tried to bring interdisciplinary teams together. So I think that the digital technology and the means of communication that we have developed now gives us many more opportunities to bring together disciplinary students into interdisciplinary teams throughout their time at university to get more exposure to the different ways of thinking and the different approaches of other disciplines, so that they can work more productively then in interdisciplinary teams once they graduate. So that would be my view of this particular question. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Please, Nouria.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I completely agree with you concerning the fact that you cannot learn a discipline without learning it deeply. In other words, I don't think specialists will disappear, because as you mentioned, Andrew, each discipline becomes deeper and deeper. And so for me, interdisciplinarity is really the art of having specialists in different disciplines work together. And for me, what makes that possible is an interest in a specific question. And so, for example, at the University of Lausanne, we've pushed for years now sustainable development and sustainability in general. This is a completely interdisciplinary question. And people from different disciplines are interested in that same problem and therefore are ready to work together. But what I found really interesting during the COVID crisis is that researchers who had never been interested in pandemics before suddenly realized that here was a real life experiment, and that they had to take advantage of this event that we all hope will not happen again anytime soon. And so this gave rise to interdisciplinary projects with people from the humanities, physicians and people like that, studying together this phenomenon that we had not seen in Europe or in Switzerland in a long time. And so I think what really brings people together in interdisciplinary studies is the subject of study, is the project itself. And then, of course, as Andrew mentioned, it can be facilitated by digital methods. But I think the essence is really having people interested in one question, in one big question that will not be resolved by a single discipline. And the pandemic is a perfect example. I mean, you can have a beautiful vaccine. If you cannot convince people to get vaccinated, you might as well not have it. And one is, you know, a biology or medical achievement, and the other one is a behavioral achievement of being able to convince people that they should get vaccinated, and etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Nouria. Ivanka, please.
I would like to pick up on some of the things that Nouria said, and that is the issue of the fact that obviously, because of such a rapid development of the vaccine, in some groups or pockets of population, there has been an increase in the trust of science, but we are still dealing with the massive distrust of science that exists. And when we talk about the students talking amongst one another so that they can understand the various disciplines, I think it now has become very important also to have a better outreach or understanding with the general public. And maybe this is an opportunity for us to regain the trust, because we have shown that actually universities have delivered in this period. And of course, this whole issue of scientific communication to the layperson is not making it so simple that it's trivial, but you have to somehow match the interest of the public. And that is something that takes time and money and commitment of top researchers who can explain what's going on. And if we are going to provide them with the opportunities to speak to the public in an interesting way, we also have to free them of some other obligations that we have. So I see this as a very important issue for universities, but it's not just a thing that we do together with all of the other things that we are doing. This requires very serious strategies that will give a result, because the resistance to, for example, the vaccine is, I think, higher than we would like to believe. And I think some countries are already facing a slowdown in the vaccination rate, because those who wanted to get vaccinated have done so, and those that are doubting are now, deciding whether they will do so or not. So in this respect, this could be a chance for universities, and that I do see as an opportunity. But we also have to see among the students themselves how they are doubting the science. This issue have the answers right now.
Thank you very much, Ivanka. I don't know if the other panelists would like to intervene on this point, or yeah, please, Edita.
Thank you. Just a few remarks. Thank you very much for your views actually regarding the interdisciplinarity. I think that strong interdisciplinary research could be a basis for interdisciplinary studies. From our perspective, from our university, I just like to provide an example that we have strong interdisciplinary teams working on some biomedical problems, as Nouria Hernandez said. I actually agree that the problem should be really how to say, clarified to work on in interdisciplinary team. And actually, these teams attract bachelor students into their projects, and those bachelors actually they come from pure programs, pure specializations, and working in this kind of teams, they somehow become interdisciplinary, and then actually after graduation they choose master programs that are truly interdisciplinary. So they're coming with their basic knowledge from different disciplines: chemists, biochemists, biologists, informatics, etc., etc. And at this stage, actually, join truly interdisciplinary programs, master programs, and then actually part of them choose even interdisciplinary PhD studies. So I think this kind of enrollment of students into interdisciplinary research is actually very good practice, and I think it's the way how to increase interdisciplinary studies at universities. Just to share experience.
Thank you, Edita. Alojzy, would you like to also react to this?
Maybe 2 sentences only, because I don't want to monopolize. If you think about digitalization, and you mean robots, artificial intelligence, etc., of course, it will help in, and I'm almost sure it will help in multidisciplinary studies. I also, well, it's good point. I mean, difficult subject, because on one side, we understand that specialization is very important. On the other side, you know, we know that the best works, PhD, dissertations, etc., are being prepared in between fields. So this means that interdisciplinary studies are very important. If we talk about medicine, I cannot imagine that we could work just now without robots, without artificial intelligence, etc. So in this sense, I would answer your question, yes, digitalization can help, but you know, the problem is broad and deep, so everyone frankly can add or look from this or from another perspective. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We have a few more minutes. I would like to have another round, very quick, on another important point, that is related to harmonization of higher education in Europe. Of course, in my opinion, European Union and Europe in general did really an amazing work in the last 20 years. If we think that the Bologna process started only in 1999, so we're talking about 22 years ago, with the universities, which are centuries and centuries old, I think we did a lot. And what we are observing now, also thanks to COVID, I mean, it's not only the movement, of course, started before, is an even higher level of harmonization. In terms of, we spoke in the previous panel also about, mobility, virtual mobility. We mentioned very quickly, but, it's a very important topic, accreditation of degrees, in different countries. As you know, the situation is still quite complicated, to have a multiple degree, to have a joint degree, usually has very, high barriers to overcome. But again, due to COVID and due to also the movement of the European universities, which in my opinion is extremely positive, at the moment, as you know, in Europe, we have 41 alliances, and, the Commission in the beginning, when the project started, with the first call, the idea was to have 25 alliances, by 2025. We are in 2021 and already 41 are funded. And all these alliances are working very strongly and very intensively towards this harmonization, towards the creation of common learning pathways, related to innovation and research, etc. And of course, UNICA, as you know, is playing an important role in debating all these issues in the EDU lab, but also keeping in touch with all the alliances, organizing roundtables and different ways of sharing knowledge. So I will stop here and ask your quick feedback on this. I mean, are you also optimistic that, due to these different factors, digitalization, European university, etc., this harmonization of higher education in Europe will go even faster, and in a few years, really for students and for graduates, will be very easy to move from one country to another, which still is not completely the case. It's much better than 20 years ago, but we have to see that it's not exactly the same to study in one country or in another. So if you can maybe comment briefly on this important point. Who would like to start there? Yes, please. I saw at the same second, a nanosecond, Nouria and Ivanka. So,
so Ivanka should speak because I'm from Switzerland, which is.
No, I corrected myself. I said Europe because when we speak about Bologna process, it's not, of course, something related to European Union. Bologna process countries. We are talking.
So. Thank you very much. I think the European University Initiative is a very important one, and one that is really taking on pace, and it's taking further something that the universities have already been doing actually informally for many years, tightening their relations or strengthening cooperation with individual partners. But I think what might even be important here is the political aspect, that the European Parliament has taken this initiative to great heart and is willing to invest a lot of money in it. And of course, money is not the key for these alliances, but if there is enough money available, the resources to allow for these exchanges of experiences, harmonization, it will make a difference. And but I also think it's a little bit of making a two-tier university system. So even though I can say I think it will do a lot of good, it will serve as a pilot system for assessing the system of higher education in Europe, it could also make some differences which the alliances themselves would need to alleviate by acting not only within their alliances, but also acting regionally and affecting generally higher education within their own region. And in this way, the alliances would impact all of Europe in a way that would be beneficial for the European higher research area. So I think the potential is there, but it's not at all easy to move this initiative from governance down to all of the departments. I think all of the existing alliances now, some have been going for 2 years, some for 1 year. They're really realizing how this top-down approach is not so easy to execute, and that people generally are very happy about it, but many people at university don't realize what the impact of the alliances is, and that will also take some time. So we have a good thing, but we need to take more advantage of this and try to energize more of the academic community.
Thank you, Ivanka. And Nouria, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something pretty general. I think the new digitalization of learning and teaching will allow basically anybody to start a university. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I think there will be many offers to students to learn things online and to have degrees online and things like that. And so for me, it seems that it will be a challenge, and it will be very important for European countries to get together and determine quality, what quality is and what accreditation is. I'm absolutely not against universities online, on the reverse, but I'm against very low quality universities online, which will give degrees to students which they then cannot use because nobody will take these degrees seriously. And I think this is very detrimental to these young people. And there, I think European countries should really unite and be careful. And again, I'm a little bit embarrassed saying that coming from Switzerland, since we're not especially good at being in the European community, but it's not my fault.
Thank you, Nouria. This is very important. Yeah, we have to really watch out for this so-called degree mails. In Europe we have this, Enicnaric network, which is very efficient. I know the Italian one, Cimea, is really working very well in looking really at, the quality of university. Then of course we have all the quality assurance system, in different countries. So I think quality and reputation of universities is really extremely important, and probably even more important since, as you said, I fully agree with you, there will be more actors in the future. So we have to really watch out for that. Andrew, please.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on the quality assurance piece, because of course the quality assurance is done nationally, and it's done nationally because universities in Europe are generally public funded. And so there is then a desire by the local government to control both the quality, to ensure that their money is being wisely spent and that students that are graduating have the appropriate qualifications. So I think that that's a major challenge for the European alliance, university alliances, in terms of the partners are working in different jurisdictions as far as quality assurance goes. So I think that's something that is going to be difficult to square the circle, as it was, because the EU Commission may have a direction, but actually the funding of higher education as it pertains to education itself, as opposed to research, is primarily funded by national governments. And so I think that will be an enduring issue. I guess the second bit is the question in terms of how many students currently are not taking advantage of mobility opportunities because of a misalignment of programs at different universities. We send students on exchange programs all over the world, and are able to do that without any significant hindrance. As you alluded to, the Bologna process has been going for 20 years now and was helped dramatically in terms of that mobility in Europe. So that one is the question, where are the students that are now going to take advantages of opportunities that they might not have had, given that from a bottom-up perspective, students often have in mind countries they want to go to because of factors external to the university. Then the bigger question in terms of the governance and funding of higher education is basically done on a national basis, not on an EU basis.
Thank you very much, Andrew. The time is almost up, but I would like just to hear one final word from Edita and Alojzy. If you wish, just a few seconds, please.
The harmonization to some extent, yes, but not necessarily harmonization of the best universities, because I think they should have freedom on research, teaching, etc. Thank you.
Thanks. Edita?
Actually, I think we should be aware of what is the next step for alliances. So perhaps we're all thinking about at least who are involved in some kind of alliances or other formats. So we think, what's the future for alliances? And this is the time, I think, to reload the purpose of alliances and pretty clearly formulate which goals we want to reach. Actually, harmonization is on the agenda, I think, for several years, and there will be in the future, I think. But we should clearly ask ourselves what kind of result we seek actually in this regard, in regard of harmonization, at what level we want to reach, and what kind of issues we should focus on, at least at present, for next few years, since it's the time to think about purpose of alliances. I would perhaps correct, to reload our thinking about the future of alliances and meaning of alliances. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. Yeah, indeed, as we know, the Commission launched pilot calls. So the alliances are funded until now. They've been funded under a pilot call. So of course, the next call will be one, based on this experience of the two rounds. And I think one effect that we all noticed was a very high involvement of the leadership of universities in this project, because some of the issues debated in the European alliances are not completely new. people who have been around for some time, they know that some of these topics are not new. But before, it was more difficult to have rectors, presidents, vice-rectors involved in this session. And also, of course, the Ministry of Education of countries are also involved. So one, in my opinion, major, really positive effect of this movement, which actually went beyond the expectation. The Commission did not expect such a success, in my opinion. And then it's really related to the involvement of the people at the highest level at the university. So, unfortunately, the time is up. I really want to thank all the panelists for the excellent contributions, the excellent interventions. Thank you very much to all of you. And now it's a pleasure to give the floor again to our keynote speaker, Xavier Prats Monné, who has been so kind to actually be online for all this time after his speech to give us a feedback at the end of the seminar. Thank you, Javier.
Thank you. Well, as I suspected, this has been a really interesting session, and I won't even try to sum up everything you said. I hope you remember. Let me just say a few words about a few things that come out as a common thread in the discussion as I saw it, and then a couple of more personal comments. As a common thread, well, the first thing, I think it was the first speaker, Alain Fuchs from PSL, who put it very bluntly in saying, we survived. I think that there's a sense, a very understandable sense of relief and even satisfaction that higher education institutions across Europe were confronted with an unprecedented challenge and huge difficulty of the unknown of coping with this sudden disappearance of physical presence in universities. And I think the general feeling is that against a real systemic challenge, universities largely survived. I'm sure there were differences in the way the general public, students, policymakers assessed how universities performed in different countries. But I think the general sense is that higher education institutions did manage to cope with the short-term impact of COVID. So that's one, I think, common sense. And it's interesting and it's actually important, because weathering that challenge was an absolute imperative, which doesn't mean that there haven't been consequences in terms of inequality and others, as some of you have said. The second common thread, which I found interesting, is that there is a generalized optimism about the future of universities, about the lessons that have been learned, and about how the pandemic, with all its challenges, has also created many opportunities. I mean, this is the general conclusion that you asked for from our panelists, Luciano, after the first session. And there was a remarkable unanimity that universities have done well. And actually, sorry, not just that they have done well, but they're actually looking to a pretty bright future as to the capacity to go back to normal in some ways, and at the same time learning from the past, which is in a way the main challenge, as Raphael put it, finding the right balance between going back to physical presence and the experience that Andrew was mentioning and others of the university, and using technology and its potential. And the third element in common was on the potential of networks to strengthen cooperation. Here is where you see probably the reflection of different perceptions and different experiences in different countries, perhaps also because the governance of higher education institutions is different in different countries. But then let me come to one personal feeling. My impression is that, well, I share the optimism, as I tried to express at the beginning, about the future of universities. My impression is that perhaps many of you, or some of you perhaps, underestimate the magnitude of the potential that you have, and perhaps the expectation that society has on you. I think that Alojzy Nowak from Warsaw mentioned this. I think that, as I tried to say at the beginning, civil society, policymakers in particular, have been extraordinarily shocked by the dramatic impact on society that the pandemic can have, but also at the ability of science and scientific cooperation to address those challenges. And I think that the outcome of this, as I tried to mention, is that there will be a very close focus on the many, many things that the scientific community can and should do for society, including on science skepticism, as was mentioned at the end. And I would have thought that the sense that somehow fundamental things have not changed in universities is a contrast to how fundamentally things are perceived to be changing in society. So maybe there is something to think about as to what extent the actual opportunities for the future of higher education are actually important and bigger than they may seem. On the transformation, well, Andrew mentioned, I mean, yes, the issue of the monopoly of submission of science. I didn't want to give the impression that there was some sort of walls crumbling around universities. On the contrary. But I think that what is true, I mean, yes, definitely, you take it literally in one way. Yes, when the printing press was invented, then access to information increased massively. At the same time, until not so long ago, you actually had to go to a university to have access to those books which were now available. And I think more importantly now, for example, for some disciplines, if you ask a student whether they prefer a degree from a conventional university or a blended degree offered by Coursera in Google, I think the question is there as to whether other providers of education will be in the market. Maybe they will be in the market with very varying degrees of quality. And I completely agree, as I mentioned, that quality assurance will be a major challenge. But the fact is that there will be, I think, there is already a massive increase of supply of education providers that traditional universities will have to face. And this takes nothing away from the experience of the university or from the future of universities. It is just, I think, an indication that transformations will be considerable in the coming years as to how universities are organized and how their governance is organized. My last point is to stress that if it's true that universities can do a lot for society, then maybe it's also true that you can ask for more. That you can ask for more in exchange of your contribution to society. And maybe this is perhaps one indication of the future. And I think that European institutions would be ready for a strategic discussion on what should be the role of universities in the future of Europe, in recovery plans, in the strategic thinking about the future of our continent. That means in terms of funding, but also in terms of contribution to the public debate on where we want to be as societies. And with this, I will conclude with real thanks for your contributions. To me, at least, have been extremely instructive and, of course, encouraging as to the future of universities, particularly your 55 universities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Xavier, for these very interesting final remarks. We have to close now, unfortunately, this webinar. I have to say that this webinar has been 3 hours long, but I did not feel at all the screen fatigue thanks to you because of your interesting intervention and talks. So I think in general, digital activities can be boring or interesting also depending on the content. This is, if I may, this is the final comment. And again, thank you very much to all the panelists in this session, in the previous session. Thank you very much for the participants. Many UNICA friends have been online the whole day with us because we're starting this morning at 9:30. So we apologize that we took too much of your time today. And we are looking forward to our other discussions like this. As you know, UNICA has a very intense calendar. We're organizing events for working groups, for rectors, vice-rectors, and other representatives of UNICA University. So we encourage you to attend other UNICA events very soon. Thank you very much again, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Luciano. Hope to see everyone in Dublin.
Yes, with pleasure.
Bye-bye. See you in Dublin.
In Dublin in June 2020.
Welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.